NAV DMC, where debates become blood sports with a new American vision.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a couple missteps. I guess John's already left on me. It's first debate, I guess, sanctioned debate that we are having at NAV here. This is John dressed up as a founder, because he is a founder of NAV. We want to thank you for joining us. We're going to run through this debate here in a second. I'm going to give it over to John, let him take care of that. First of all, I would like to shill for NAV. If you want to support us, please do that. You can do that multiple ways. The easiest ways right now are send in super chats. We love super chats. But we also have a merch store, and you can buy merch from us. We get proceeds from that. That also, you can get something back. Also represent NAV in some way, whether that is a new shirt that just came out just for you. You want to get some information from the government, just for you. Just get a FOIA request. And so we got that shirt. We have tinfoil hat shirt. Put on your thinking cap, and it's a tinfoil hat. That's nice. That's in the merch store. Should be linked on the channel. Also, there should be one in the description. What else? Oh, memberships. Join, please. Monthly memberships, that would be nice. I think it's $4.99. And then there's also a $15 option. We would love the $15 option. But you can become a gold member. And as most of you can see, like AI World Champion over here has an emblem. Marketimoto has an emblem. They're fantastic emblems. Get in early so that you can pick up the new emblems as they come along on that time frame. So like I said, I will be hosting this. I'll be running through some of the shilling. I'm selling the things to you to get you to buy, to support NAV. So we appreciate that. I guess John needs a half a second, so I'm gonna give him that. How do we like the setup? How do we like NAV? Yeah? How do we like NAV? Is that solid?
NAV DMC, where debates become blood sports with a new American vision.
Shout out to Atlas. We put that together in like 3 minutes here a second ago. Were we late? No, we weren't late. We're never late. We're never late. You're just here early. We're on time when we are here. All that being said, John's going to get into this, but like I said, the super chats, we would love those super chats. And if you want to get involved into this debate, which is basically who controls the U.S. government, please send in super chats. Those will be read at the end after the discussion happens. There's a Q&A period. Please send in some hefty super chats. That would be nice. We appreciate it. John, you must be working on something. All right. What else? I guess I can lay out a little bit of the debate. I was gonna let the mod take care of that. And he's coming back right now. But basically, like I said, the debate is who pulls America's strings? Obviously, it's a JQ question, the Jewish question, if you will. That's being had across the board right now. There's a mass awakenings that are happening. This debate will involve Chuck Mason at Chuck Mason's show on YouTube. I think it's Chuck Mason 1 on Twitter. And then also Atlas Thug will be taking the affirmative in that Israel controls the levers of power, at least more so than the American people, I think would be his position. They're going to dive into that here in a second. Atlas is atlas_thugged.com. Where's my ear hole? Atlas_thugged. Is it another underscore on Twitter? 2 underscores on Twitter. And we definitely appreciate these guys having this. We've had multiple kind of interactions, not full-on debates. The audience have been asking for this, and so we're gonna give it to them. We're gonna give it to them, and this is what it is. John, take it away.
We're ready for you. Yes, sorry, we're running slightly behind, but we are all set up now. We have one little bit of housekeeping. Atlas threw a very, very large document at us full of sources. Probably way more than we'll be able to cover today. But in fairness to Chuck, and Chuck and I did not have a chance to talk because he was working and just got here. But do we want to pick like 4 or 5 of them to stick to, or maybe there's ones, Chuck, whenever you're ready in a second, that that you're ready and prepared to talk to? We're getting his computer hooked up here so he can check some of these sources live as we debate. But I don't know if I'm assuming Atlas can hear me wherever.
Let me, we can do this. Here, let's do this. I'll throw, you and Atlas can have a slight discussion real quick. Audience can watch.
And Chuck might be ready actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty much up and running now.
Okay.
He's ready.
I didn't know if there was a
Word.
couple specific ones that
So I'll
Atlas-
ask you, and Chuck. Yeah, is there?
Well-
I think you made a very fair point, which there was like a
No,
lot.
first of all, Atlas, thank you. It was very thorough, and I really appreciate it. You know what I
Of course
found
I
was, just to let you know where kind of coming from, when you this all kind of came together in a week. So by the time we had communication, and this is one of the busiest weeks of my year, the next 3 weeks are. So if we could tackle a couple of points today, if we want to debate this further, maybe what we could do is come up with some topics. I can give you stuff, you can give me stuff, and then we can do this a couple of weeks out or something, so that we can, have a little structure to it if it doesn't work well today. What I can say from what you had sent, and can you turn the volume up on my headphones a little bit more? Thanks.
Am I not loud enough?
No, to turn them down just a little bit. There you go.
It's probably on their end.
It's our end.
On our end. Yep. The things that I was able to look at is that we might be able to go off of was the Israel Lobby Archive. We could talk about the Scofield Reference Bible,
Ooh, good one.
Just the evangelical, the Christian standpoint of this. That's a topic that I could dive into. I think that I could talk about the Israel Lobby here, and what I was able to look up in terms of that background. We did kick around a little bit about Israel and Hamas the last time we had a conversation, and I've delved into that a little bit. I don't have a lot in the way of source material, although what I've found is consistent. The stuff that I found is consistent. We could begin with those things just as a preliminary, and then be able to go from there. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I guess in effort of trimming it down, I'll open with my overall argument, and then we can kind of maybe go piece by piece over what categorically I think supports it.
Okay, and
Similar
what I think
to
would
what
be
you said with Christianity.
right. So what I think would be good to do is for you to say not only what you think is happening, but how it's happening. And it's a little harder for me because if I don't think there's as much happening, it's hard. You can't prove a negative in that regard. I mean, that's almost impossible to do.
We're here to moderate,
So,
Chuck. That's
all
our
right.
job.
But go ahead and say what you guys, you kind of do your best to say what your position is and how you think it's happening, and then I'll say my position. And I think my position is going to be fairly representative, I'm not a Zionist, not from the standpoint of the evangelical right or these people that think Israel should be on a pedestal and it can do no wrong. You won't find that, but I think you'll find I have a fairly moderated position.
So Chuck has deferred the kick to the second half, Atlas. You shall receive. Offense
Word.
first.
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it. What I would like to open with is this, actually, because ultimately I will be arguing from a preponderance of evidence. And given the fact that I don't think that you would find any criminal writing, I did it, we're not going to find any document that's going to say Israel controls America. And so I'd start with that, largely arguing from a bunch of circumstantial evidence and the preponderance of such that points all to a consistent argument, which is the fact that Israel does possess commandeering influence over America. The overall argument would be this, that this has been a long-standing thing pretty much since the early 1850s, but it more so picks up in the early 1900s and continues throughout the 1900s and gets us to where we are today. And the operation is basically two-pronged. And it's hard to say basically about any of this because there's so much complex nature to all of it. But it's as simple as this, if I could break it down. It would be blackmail and religious subversion. Now, blackmail was kind of born out of this 1920s, prohibition era, also gun surplus era of, the post-World Wars. And through that period, which gave birth to the mafia, the Jewish mob, many other different crime syndicates based around ethnicity or religion or nationality. And this was also coming from the era of when many immigrants were coming to America, right? The Ellis Island was overflowing. And so as this kind of continued, it kept this kind of racial segregation because people stayed around who they were most comfortable with. And from that, you got blackmail, which then evolved into sexual blackmail, which most notably was J. Edgar Hoover, who was the first FBI director who served for 50 years, or a little bit just underneath that. I think it's 48 years to be exact. And Edgar Hoover was notoriously blackmailed for his homosexual relations, and he was blackmailed for pretty much the majority of his FBI tenure there. And it came from people associated with Murder Inc., which ropes in Meyer Lansky. But to put a pin on that, that kind of evolves, and that actually preceding that was Samuel Untermeyer blackmailing or facilitating blackmail with Woodrow Wilson around a $40,000 charge, which Untermeyer paid up front, which ultimately bought him a Supreme Court justice pick later on. Now, you fast forward this, then we get different iterations of it. We get the blackmail from the NUMEC program that was born out of there, which was there was a key witness who was a worker at NUMEC, an ex-worker, who gave a very lengthy and long-winded testimony about him finding the shipping order to the nuclear material being exported out to Israel. And then from there, we get Epstein. And so there's like a long line of series of different blackmail operations. They're all culminating and they all flow in one direction, all meant to commandeer influence towards Israel's interest. And that basically culminated mostly into sexual blackmail. And this came about with videos and photos because with Samuel Untermeyer, it was because he was a lawyer. And so he basically presented to Woodrow Wilson. He had a case and he would be willing to pay up front the $40,000 if Woodrow Wilson would promise him something in return. And that was a Supreme Court justice pick. The second element that actually is more nefarious, in my opinion, is the element that actually attacks Christianity. And this element would be the religious subversion. Now, this religious subversion actually also does come from Samuel Untermeyer, who is typically donned as the man behind Schofield. And it wasn't just Untermeyer, it was also Louis Marshall. And it was between these two individuals. Louis Marshall actually is considered by many someone who actually eclipsed Untermeyer in power and recognition. But both were very actively anti-Christian. Louis Marshall notably being the one who pushed against America being a Christian nation. And that would have been, late 1800s, very early 1900s. Now, Untermeyer basically ropes in Schofield, and they basically had to make and build somebody who would be the Protestant theologian who could be the face card for what they were going to push, which was going to ultimately be the hybrid that became Christian Zionism. And so they found him in Kansas. Next thing you know, Schofield is being financed and brought into the Lotus Club, even though he was basically a failed attorney. He was a drunkard. He was on his second marriage. He was definitely not the stand-up image of an American pastor. And then it's through Schofield, he gets financed to a trip over to England, in which he does credit multiple people there, especially Oxford scholars, for his edits, which what became the Schofield Bible, or the Schofield Reference Bible. And the Schofield Reference Bible is the one that replaces the long accepted idea of the promise to Abraham, to the promise to the descendants of Israel. And thus the birth of Christian Zionism was born. And the reason why this is important is because it is the groundswell support for Christian Zionism, for Israel. And so it helps adopt and bring in and proliferate among the average American by co-opting their Christian faith to give an element of support, religious support, a fervor, a zealotry, if you will, that also coincides with all the state actions and state actors who are otherwise not supportive of Israel, but are just wishing to not be exposed for their sexual promiscuity. And thus, those are the operations throughout the last 100+ years that have led Israel to commandeer America's interest. And most notably, even in the last couple of days, we are getting reports from Jonathan Pollard and Mike Huckabee, who are meeting, and Jonathan Pollard being notably a notorious Israeli spy who was sentenced to prison for 30 years, who received a hero's welcome, who was flying on a private jet that was financed by the Adelsons, and he sat down where he was welcomed by Bibi Netanyahu, and they cheer for him. Jonathan Pollard is also known for not regretting anything that he did, and he is known for being Israel first in his own words. And additionally, on top of that, Jonathan Pollard is one of two recent admissions of the fact that Israel threatened nuclear warfare against the United States to coerce the United States to do something in their political interest. And I could probably keep going, but I think that would pretty much sum it up for my opening argument there.
Okay.
Wherever you want to start.
Well, let me say what I'm saying. And then I'm going to go back and I have questions for you relative to this. So I see Israel as, I'm not a dispensationalist, so I do not see Israel's formation as somehow an element of the fulfillment of biblical prophecy that there has to be a reformed Israel that the temple will be rebuilt. There's going to be a millennium. All that comes from dispensationalism in terms of the end times. So I don't see Israel as having an elevated position. I hold with what the church has held throughout its history, which was the fact that there would be no reformed Israel. The promises about the land and the temple and the nation operating within the Holy Land was those promises were fulfilled throughout Israel's history, and then everything takes a whole other step in terms of once you have Jesus and his death and resurrection, and then the church. So I see Israel simply as a Western democracy. It's important to have a Western democracy anywhere at this point in time, regardless of its failures, regardless of however you consider it, however it must operate. And that they also do one thing in terms of Christianity, which is they occupy the land with the holy sites for Christendom. And so for me as an individual, I want to see Israel. I think it's in the United States' interests to make sure that they're supporting Israel as a democracy within. It's set against Islam in that area, and that they continue to function in those terms. I don't necessarily mind the amount of support that they get, in terms of the military aid that they get in that regard. That doesn't excuse some of the things Israel has done, but at the same time, Israel does not, what am I going to say here? They're surrounded by people that have wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth. So, as you said the other day, Atlas, they have a right to defend themselves against all that hostility. But I do not see how Israel, when you take a look at them, how they're pulling the levers behind the United States. I have yet to see how that is actually happening. How is it that that they actually control government, or that they control what's happening in America? There's simply no evidence of that. Now, and I guess maybe now that I've stated my position, I could segue, and I'm going to ask you some questions. So Hold on.
We're just getting into. We'll get into rebuttals. Just I guess state your position now.
Well, that is fairly my position. They simply happen to be a democracy, a liberal democracy existing within the Holy Land. They do get favor from this. I will at least say what you've said about the Scofield Reference Bible and modern dispensationalism. They do get, I think, favor within the American mindset to a limited degree, simply because the bulk of Christians in America are not dispensationalists, and the Catholics still hold to, and the Orthodox and Lutherans and Presbyterians still hold to the model that the church had throughout its history, that they never expected the nation of Israel to be reborn once again, once the temple was destroyed in 70 AD after the resurrection. So yeah, we do have that element of it. So does it get some favor? Absolutely, it does. And particularly because it as a Christian, quote, nation, it encompasses the Holy Land. But I don't see any evidence of them pulling the levers of power and usurping, like essentially they're the man behind the curtain, that they're the ultimate puppet master in America. I just don't see any direct evidence of that.
Just from the opening statements, things that we, I think, agree on so far. So it sounds like, Chuck, you are saying you do believe Israel has influence in the United States, whether it's just more than zero. You believe that is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Like there's nothing to fit that. Obviously, you can be friends with other people and countries, and that doesn't mean anything negative. Well, I agree with that.
I see. So I think there is a mutual. I think there's a mutual benefit between the two countries, and I think that it falls under the umbrella of, at this point in time, when you see the West beginning to crumble, and you still have Marxism, when you see Marxism rising here in America, when you see that, China still has a lot of strength. There's still Marxist nations in the area. I mean, throughout the world. And then you have Islam, and you cannot take Islam lightly. So we do put a tremendous amount of our energy and effort into having relationships and mutually beneficial financial relationships, mutually beneficial military relationships with those nations that are ideologically aligned with us and that help create a network of nations throughout the world to protect Western interests.
Okay. And then, so are we good to move forward to some of the specific points Atlas brought up? And just to summarize, Chuck, you said you've seen no evidence. Atlas just gave us a century of what his, well, we'll call it a theory. Hold on.
I'd like to talk about
a
that
blackmail step by step. So the picture is presenting is that it's been a blackmail operation, and that is how they've gained control.
Wait. See, but to me, there's a huge disconnect. Just because Hoover was blackmailed by the Jewish mob, okay, how does that translate into them having gained the levers of power? And more specifically, you can cite the blackmail that you want, and people can be blackmailed. But seriously, who's whispering in whose ear that leads Trump or anybody in the administration to run this Jewish agenda?
All right,
Well,
I think.
let me just take a couple things back.
Hold on, Atlas. You're going to get rebuttal. All right, I think that's enough to dive into rebuttals. I think there's a launching point there for Atlas. Before we do that, and I'm gonna turn it over to John to kind of segue us back into this. There's some newer people here. This is a debate. We're debating something. It's an informal debate. Largely, we'll moderate it a little bit, but it's an informal debate, more of a discussion, especially on the back end. And so on the back end of that discussion, we'll have super chats. We'll do a Q&A. So if you have any specific questions for Chuck or specific questions for Atlas with any respect to, I guess inevitably it's going to be Israeli or Jewish power within the United States, Mossad, CIA, I'm sure all of this will come up. World War II, World War I, everything up and down, USS Liberty, you name it, it's probably going to come up here in the next 30 minutes. So go ahead and throw in those super chats and support us, buy merch and a membership. Those links are in the description. John's going to kick it off for the next thing.
Yeah, well, I just want to again say thank you to Chuck and Atlas for being willing to have this talk. To my knowledge, nobody is actually discussing this in a good faith sort of way. Chat, do your thing. Chuck understands that is Chuck versus the internet right now, and he's willing to do it. Damn it,
I'm willing to do it,
and so I hope to have that sort of fire.
There's one thing I want to say as I watch this chat go up.
I am complimenting Chuck, and he interrupts me.
As I watch this chat, and this is why, it's Chuck versus reality, right? So there's two forms of reasoning. One is this to me is entirely deductive reasoning. And you guys have already come to a conclusion, and you're just finding whatever things have happened in history that you think support the conclusion. And that's very different than running from evidence to draw the conclusion.
I'd be willing to admit that seems on at least initially hearing it like a fair point. Are you?
That's what we're here for.
I would say that's actually completely misaccurate representation, because most people who end up in the camp that I'm in is because they basically were molded by the indoctrination and then broke out of it, which is why they actually have a bit of fervor to it. And one thing I can't let you skate by with is actually the point you made about J. Edgar Hoover, which is you go, how does blackmailing the first FBI director for 50 years, how does that mean they're close to levers of power? I'm like, so who in your opinion would they have to blackmail? The FBI director of the United States of America is like not high enough up of someone to be blackmailed by an organization to be influenceable. And you miss the fact that this kind of molded into World War II, where you end up getting the U.S. Navy and the government making a deal with the mob because the government had no control over its ports. So right then and there, in the lead up to World War II, they had made a partnership between the government and the Jewish mob. New York Post, you can find that.
Huckabee and Pollard is a good one. We'll get to that. But I think that's an equally fair point. The FBI director.
Okay, but what are they blackmailing him for? But see, this is what you haven't shown. what are they blackmailing him for, and what are they asking for in return? Because they could just be
Well, the
saying,
debate
"Hey,
started
Edgar,
10 minutes ago, Chuck.
what's
Yeah,
that?"
my understanding, Chuck, is that he was. I mean, again, is this
And number
proven? I
one,
don't know,
hold
but he was a
on.
homosexual.
Well, I know you
So
understand it
that's
was
what they
homosexual.
and that was not socially
Totally,
acceptable.
I
Okay,
totally
okay.
understand that he was
No, I
homosexual.
think I misunderstood your question.
Okay, but Hoover dies almost 50 years ago. And but what you're not showing me, okay, is that let's just say the Jewish mob was doing that, but what is this translating into? That how is this directly translating into that this goes all the way up to the president and Congress, because that's what drives the nation. As important as Hoover might have been, how then does Hoover go into the Oval Office and go, "You're going to do this for me"?
I think with blackmail.
All right. But
Hey,
he's going to
well,
black.
Can we
this is
time out. Can we give Atlas his 5 minutes, and
Yeah,
then
sorry,
we'll go into rebuttals. Let's go into rebuttals, and then we can have discussion. Deal?
yeah. So this is kind of my point. You keep saying like, well, you haven't demonstrated it yet, and it's like, well, I gave you my opening argument, and I haven't spoken since.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
well,
Let's
give me a
get.
chance to. Edgar Hoover was in power when the JFK nuclear weapons debacle was going on. Specifically, Edgar Hoover being on one side when RFK was pushing for it initially. RFK wanted them to register as the AZC under FARA. He wanted them to push for them heavily to register under FARA. And it was during this era that RFK gets assassinated by Sirhan, as well as JFK. And I believe during the time, RFK was the Attorney General, so he was in a position of power to push for that. Although he lets go of the Attorney General role because he makes a push for presidency. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director who was in charge during this time period. So when the push came for the investigation, when the overturn had happened, for they wanted the I believe it was Edgar Hoover. They had asked Hoover, should we push further into this investigation? Should we continue to push along with the DOJ to register AZC under FARA? And then Hoover kind of has like this flip. He has a full 180 where he's like, I don't think there needs to be any kind of further investigation into this. And so it kind of dies until they get another further push where they give him like 72 hours to convert over to under FARA. And what do they do instead? They don't even respond in the 72 hours. AZC actually separates into then it was the Kennan Committee, which became what we know now as AIPAC. So Edgar Hoover, being the FBI director, when he's owned by the Jewish mob, they have him under their thumb. So whatever they need him to do to push and pull, he is an element of the government that needs to be co-opted in terms of pushing this through, or in that case, in that scenario, making sure that AZC could operate without as much transparency as humanly possible for as long as possible until they were ultimately forced to split their operations into AIPAC, and then AZC retained its namesake.
So, well, hold on a second. Of course, well, hold on. Hold on.
I am home. I'm in the back on a live.
Hey, Zeb. Good phone call. Fucking Zeb Boykin Productions, man. Talking on the phone to his friends. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, but this goes back to what I had said. You brought up all kinds of stuff that I have not had. I had no.
So I want to say that's a fair point. If something
Okay.
comes up that you haven't had a chance to look at,
Right. So this is what I'm saying, that if you want to do this, that we really need to see if, and I had said this to John in a text. I know you got some other things going on, but I had said, if you want to debate how, because what I want to do is really look into, because what you're doing is you're saying that J. Edgar Hoover was the Jewish mob's puppet master.
Yeah, I think that is what he's saying.
Okay. And so I want to see your evidence as to how he was specifically being blackmailed, what they had on him, the correspondence. And
there was a homosexual photo of him with his aide.
Hold on a second. But I would like to see what that specifically looks like and how that would be documented in terms of evidence. Number one, the whole
Chuck, you want to look at gay pictures?
All right, no, I don't want gay pictures. That's Atlas. Never mind. Listen, we're not going there.
No,
okay.
He was answering your question.
Well, hold on before I say that. But what I was saying was that if you want to debate these things like this is what I wanted to avoid today, is just going boom with all of this, and then I've had no opportunity to really dig into any of this.
So should we say that J. Edgar Hoover thing is you would like another week or 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to debate these things specifically, I'd be glad to do it. But what I'm going to need to do is, and I think that what we should do, if you would like to debate, to do something like this, is to say we're going to debate the Jewish mob's ability to control J. Edgar Hoover, and then how that directly translated into foreign policy during the Kennedy administration that leads up, that like an unbroken chain of influence that leads up to today. Okay. And I think
Yep.
that's really, in my mind, that's the only way that we're going to be able to do this,
That's what I
effectively.
prepared for.
Okay. Well, but like I said, I got a week, brother, in the middle of it, and I didn't even
That's
get a
right.
week. I
Let
got
me ask you
We can
this,
keep
Chuck.
going.
Is there one
We
of
can keep
those
going.
parts of that you
What's
did have
that?
time to look at? Is there something on there that you did have time?
Well, oh yeah, I mean, so the things that
I think you had said like Schofield Bible was one.
well, quote unquote Christianity and the Schofield Bible, and
Yeah.
also I took a look at just the one thing really briefly, a couple of things in the document that you sent, which
Can
was
I establish something real quick? And I mean, it's not any fault of Chuck's, but what Atlas is presenting is essentially a decade's trail to get where he's at. And I feel like I could give you 8 weeks and you'll never get to this point. It's like this is a problem when people are new to what we call the JQ, is that they want information that is decades worth in 5 to 10 minutes, and it just doesn't really work in that manner. So, but to Chuck's point, I mean, I guess the specifics on Hoover, maybe we can weigh off and more just kind of, I guess, lean into a little bit of current day, and then whatever he has had time to go through.
The Hoover thing is a whole debate. Like
So-
maybe we just make that
Sorry,
a debate.
Atlas.
It's all
okay.
good.
But traditionally, well, and you would want this if you were in a court of law, if you were being accused of a
Sure,
crime,
true.
Atlas, is that
No,
if
I'm
someone
cool with it. If you want to keep going week after week, I'm fine with that. I didn't say I have a problem with that.
but this is really pertinent to hit this right now. So because what you've said is like this bombshell that Hoover was a puppet. Hoover was being, the Jewish mob was a puppet master with Hoover. All right. Because he was homosexual and blackmailing. And I totally understand that.
It wasn't just the Jewish mob. The Jewish mob was an element of it. That was like the American wing here in the States. And the connection that I haven't gotten able to expand upon is the connection that came from the war, the gun surplus era after World War II, which also started a lot of the gun smuggling that basically was circumventing embargoes, right? And so America had more guns on soil than it knew what to do with. And this caused, because it coincided with the establishment and the founding of Israel, where a bunch of, between the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi, the 3 paramilitary organizations, with 2 of which are designated terrorist organizations by Britain, were fighting to establish the nation of Israel. And so the Jewish mob, because they ran the ports and they already owned basically all the logistical framework, and we know that because the U.S. government had to make a deal in order to help compete against the Eastern Seaboard against Germany, that what you had was a gun smuggling operation that ran essentially for the most part down into South America, that came up and back into the Middle East, where they were giving guns to help fight against all the Palestinians. And that gets even more insane because then you realize, well, the Great Britain didn't even have any really leg to stand on to give that land away in the first place. And so we meet all these things, but the main point there is it's not just the Jewish mob. The Jewish mob was like the American element inside America that was assisting the Israeli element, or the Jewish element, over in the Middle East. And this was all happening in tandem, and it was all because of a series of circumstances that allowed and opened it up for them.
Like Sicilians, you're saying?
Taking you at face value at the moment, okay? Taking you at face value, what it sounds to me is that this is what people do, okay? I mean, you're going to use whatever you can use for influence for your people at some point in the world. But again, just because they found a way to run guns over to Israel in that regard, for them to be able to, quote unquote, protect whatever Israeli interests are occurring. How does that then translate into Israeli as the ultimate puppet master for everything within the United States?
Well, because it went nuclear. And like we were discussing last week, the reason why it's so contentious and why Iran will not give up despite all the sanctions is because having a nuclear weapon as a nation state is the singular number one deterrent that you have that can protect your people.
Okay,
and once Israel gained the nuclear weapon under the guise of the U.S. policy of ambiguity, even to this day, we won't acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons. It is allowed for them to have basically a one-handed, and not being party to the NPT, an ability to threaten people with nuclear weapons, even though on paper it says that they don't. and it all
Okay, but
coincides together.
you pivoted. You pivoted. And I asked you, how does running guns out of ports to there
Because
turn
they
into
ran
the
things like nuclear materials, and they ran nuclear triggers, like the krypton triggers from
whoa.
Armani.
How does running nuclear material and nuclear triggers mean that what you're really implying here, if I hear you correctly, is saying that Israel's like the puppet master, like Trump can't make a decision without Israel signing off, or that every decision that Trump makes and all of our Congress and all of our policy is done within the background of Israel's control or Israel signing off.
I think that's what he is saying.
But you're okay. And you could say that they're
No, it's not. Well, here's the argument. What you're doing is you're trying to poison the well by saying
no,
that
I'm
my
not. I'm trying
argument is that Israel controls all elements categorically across the board. What I'm saying is specifically that Israel does possess enough influence to commandeer. Commandeer meaning that it can take the steering wheel, it can drive it, it can pull it, not that it's the one at the steering wheel. And so that's why I referenced the multiple times that we have from both Pollard and literally just like 5 days ago from John Kirikow, that 2 times, 2 separate occasions. Once when Henry Kissinger placed embargoes on Israel, Jonathan Pollard talked about the fact that they bragged and they threatened the use of unconventional warfare. And then he says everybody knows what that means. And then most recently, John Kirikow, that's also corroborated by Max Blumenthal's article in the Gray Zone, when he was given the fact when Charlie Kirk tried pushing back against Trump with bombing Iran, he was barked at. But what did we get with that? Was John Kirikow, was that his source said that they threatened to use nuclear weapons if the United States would not step in and bomb Iran's nuclear facilities.
Well, you know
So
what?
that's not enough to control influence. That doesn't commandeer us away from our interests. And this
Where's
leaves
that
out all of the forever wars in the Middle East too.
Where's that in? Where is this? You know what? Where is it in writing? Where is it documented that Israel as a government says if you don't bomb Iran, we're going to launch nuclear weapons?
The spy who spent 30 years in prison for spying for Israel, who has never apologized for it, who is a hero in Israel, who is about to get a run for the Knesset, said verbatim on video.
I don't give a shit what somebody says as a spy. You know what? People can say all kinds of crazy shit they want.
Well, Chuck,
where is it going to? But no.
You did ask.
I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to basically do this, where no matter what source was presented, you would try to find a way to eliminate its credibility.
I said I would. I back up and say I know Chuck. I don't know Atlas personally, but I know Chuck is arguing from good faith. Chuck, I believe Atlas is also arguing from good faith.
Okay.
If we don't have the time or haven't had the time to check this stuff, I think we just say that and move to another part that we have had time to check.
We can't.
But if he says A happened and you say no, it didn't.
No, I didn't say no.
I'm just saying if that happens.
I didn't say
it doesn't. Get
I didn't
us anywhere.
say that. And I think that what we're going to end up with here is we're probably never going to come to a meeting of the minds on this.
Very possible.
And here's the reason why. Let's just say for a moment I agree with you, Atlas, that this guy who was a spy said this. You mean everybody gets to say whatever the hell they want, and if it runs along with your narrative, then we take it as gospel truth.
That's why I sourced John Kirikow, former CIA agent, on a completely different time that they had also done this. That I gave you 2. Now you can deny 2 and just say both because they're in federal agencies, they shouldn't take their word. But like, what's the response to that? Because that's the whole thing that I led with, the preponderance of evidence. The whole argument here is about a cabal of people, someone who is purposely and intentfully for 100 years trying to stay behind the scenes. Like, I'm not going to be able to give you, again, like a slip that goes, yep, signed here, Edgar Hoover, I was owned by Israel. Like, that's an insane ask, because that's why I said circumstantially.
But by the same, you don't get the other side of the coin, which is what you're telling. See, what I feel like what you just said right there was this. You know, I'm looking at you going, what's the trail of evidence here? And what you kind of said was, I'm not sure that I can give you this exact trail of evidence that you're looking for. You know, but then I'm supposed to just accept all of this.
Well,
as
I'm supposed to wait for you to verify everything, because you don't even know one of the most notorious uses of blackmail against Edgar Hoover.
So here's what's tricky here, and Chuck, I'll put the screws to you this time.
That's fine.
You say Atlas is taking these things that happened, some of which you say, yes, I've heard of that. Some of them which you say, no, I haven't. Irrelevant. But he interprets the facts in a way that fit his argument.
100%.
Are you not doing that also? If somebody says, Well, that spy didn't mean it. Are you not taking a fact that he said it
No, I didn't.
and saying it must
no,
not, it must have
no.
been a spy thing?
I
I'm genuinely asking.
I said no, and I need you to listen, because what I had said was, I agree with you that he said it.
Okay.
Okay. However, just because one individual says one thing that you like what he had to say, if you're going to say something with that much weight and that much sensationalism, then it needs to be backed up. You're going to have some level of an official source. I mean, because what you can do is you can find anybody who will say anything, anywhere, at any time. And if you're going to allow each of those individual
how do we
statements to be
On that
uncorrupt-
issue specifically, so what
Yep.
you'd be looking for, right, is well, you would, but for that to have some credibility, you would be like, so shouldn't Jonathan Pollard probably be involved in like high official meetings then? For that to have credibility, someone who, and he is literally, breaking news story from yesterday, Mike Huckabee, who in a meeting that he didn't tell the White House, he didn't tell Secret Service, he didn't tell anyone, met in secret with Jonathan Pollard back in July. I wonder what for.
Well, you wonder
Like,
what
I
for.
don't know what you want to say. I mean, like, this guy's clearly involved in these things. And then,
Well,
and to top it all off, here's another connection. The person who flew him out in 2015 back to Israel, Sheldon Adelson, who his wife, Miriam Adelson, has given $230 million to Donald Trump. I mean, there's connections galore. I just like, you have such a bad faith way of the fact that when I say this certain thing, what you're trying to do is say, because there's not like a record or like some kind of like trail that's like New York Times reported on it, the New York Post reported on it, like you're not going to accept it as fact.
Well, but this goes back to one of the things that I'd said in the article that I wrote. This is part of what we call now in many ways a post-literate culture, from the standpoint of that's what we used to do, because people could say whatever shit they want to say anywhere, anyway, anyhow. It can be taken any way, that we would go looking for external corroboration of these things. Because what you just said was, so-and-so had a meeting with Mike Huckabee. I mean, can't you see it? And I'm like, until you give me what the hell was going on in that meeting, it could be anything.
I know exactly what was happening in that meeting, Chuck, because I'm reading and I'm paying attention and I prepared for this debate. The meeting was to thank Mike Huckabee because 14 years ago, Mike Huckabee went to Israel to lobby for Jonathan Pollard's freedom.
Okay.
What else do you want? I mean, we could just keep going, but you're going to keep coming up with this fact that you didn't have time to read it or you don't know. And I would say that's bad faith. I sat here all week reading and studying up for debate, only for this morning for you to send a message in that it was maybe a little bit too much. We got to segment it back. What am I supposed to do with it?
It was a shit. I have been desperately trying to say, let's pick something we did have time to research and talk about that, because that avoids all the problems we're having right now.
Well, let Chuck pick.
That's what I'm saying. That's kind of what I would like too, honestly. Like Schofield Bible, or
well, we could talk about the Schofield Bible if you want. And then you sent in this one document here, the Israel Lobby Archive.
Oh yeah,
okay,
yeah, that one too.
All right, where you have these things like the city of Chesapeake and Virginia's Department of Environmental Permit, where everybody's up in arms because an Israeli businessman or somebody is getting a $1.5 million contract to farm salmon.
I didn't read this.
Okay, and you might not have read that.
The Israeli Lobby Archive is a massive website. And the reason why I have it there in the sources is because they do provide a government document paper trail from the beginning of the ask, from when they wanted to push for AZC, the American Zionist Council, to be registered under FARA. And there's a paper trail. Now, let me go find, maybe go find the specific one. I have it here.
Right, but I'm going to push back on you.
But I threw it in there as an overall in case I sourced anything else from this
really
place.
Quickly. Okay. When you look at me and you go, well, I've been studying and I've been doing in good faith. Well, I get this thing on Monday saying, hey, you want to do a program on Friday? Bad on me. What I should have done is say, no, let's put this out 3 to 4 weeks. So I have an opportunity to actually look at all of this. So I'm getting my shit jumped here.
You're not.
And I'm getting my shit jumped here.
You're not.
When the reality, what I should have done is, or maybe you guys who do this stuff and are so damn net savvy that you guys should have backed up and said, this really isn't a good idea. Not only to do less than a week.
I said
but
this at the beginning of the
Wednesday,
show.
All right.
I said this at the beginning.
To be fair, you presented yourself in the last 2 times on Sunday as someone who's very read up on the Reagan era, very adamantly opposed to these things. And I can only imagine if you are that adamantly opposed to something, you'd be able to back it up. And you wouldn't need, when push comes to shove, time to actually look things up.
All right, but how do you want to talk about the Israeli? Like Ronald Reagan was an Israeli puppet? You're out of your mind. I lived through the Reagan era. Okay,
Ronald
Ronald Reagan was.
Reagan.
Let's talk
Ronald
about that.
Reagan pushed through no-fault divorce. Ronald Reagan was another president in a long line of the subversion of Protestant values and Christianity.
All right, but how is he? But how is he an Israeli puppet? That's what I'm saying. I lived through the Reagan years. Okay, we weren't. If you want to, all right. What we're
Should
gonna
we
have
give him
to
a
do-
chance to answer?
All right.
I think that's a tough
Well,
question.
I did, and then you went to
Well, okay,
Then you went
so
to a character
that means
assassination on
no,
Reagan.
No, that's not true. But
That's
I'm
what-
not.
that's
It's me not
exactly
doing
what it
my
was.
job.
That's not character assassination. He literally did do that.
Okay, but you pivoted. I said, how is he an Israeli puppet? And
Let's
then
let him answer.
Well, okay.
Because for one, you keep poisoning. We're saying Israeli puppet. Like it's not. I'm not sitting here saying it's like it's nefarious for one, but it's not like a Hollywood. They're twisting their mustaches type. We have connections going from John Angleton, which I'm surprised. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say his name on air. He's been so submerged. But you have this capture from FBI through JFK through Lyndon B. Johnson. And by the time it does get to Lyndon B. Johnson, because Lyndon B. Johnson was a Zionist himself, his aunt was a Zionist who was a part of COA, they were already completely in. They didn't need to have any more kind of deep level operations. And it was a handoff. And then we get to where we are with Epstein. Right now, I will admit my knowledge of all of the different handlers and the different kind of blackmailers from the end of JFK to probably in the early 90s is probably a little bit lacking. I'll give you that. So I probably can give you exact examples of Reagan. But the point being is that was the big ask anyways, was during JFK, the big ask and the big push was because they were in a do or die mode. Israel, after being basically pressured out of Egypt and the Gaza Strip because of the Suez Canal crisis, they knew they needed a nuclear weapon because they didn't have anything that could counteract the global world powers, which at the time was the US and the USSR.
Okay.
So this puts them in the do or die mode with David Ben-Gurion. And then this kind of continues. David Ben-Gurion famously resigned because of how much pressure JFK was putting on him. But it didn't matter because, was it Isham? Isham ends up taking over. And they continue. They just keep going. They end up making a deal with France to end up building the Dimona nuclear facility. JFK, the whole entire time, he's like, these sons of bitches lie to me constantly. Direct quote from JFK. And when he does go look at Dimona personally, physically, what do? They set up a fake plant for him to go look around. And then once they do get the bomb, they do get, and this is all from NUMEC, this is the Apollo affair. They get the nuclear materials because they were placing them, smuggling them in food irradiator trucks. And you can find this again, both sourced from Roger Mattson and I believe Keith.
I don't doubt any of this at all.
The head of the Institute of Research for Middle Eastern Foreign Affairs or Foreign Relations, one of the two. And they corroborate this and they show that similar industries in the similar time frames dealing with similar nuclear material, there was no other industry or there was no other company like NUMEC that was losing as much nuclear material as they were. And then the moment that Zalman Shapiro is out of there, the Zionist who is running the whole thing, smuggling it over to Israel, as soon as he's gone, it immediately drops and they have higher throughput. So as soon as Zalman Shapiro is out of there, they have higher throughput, they're using more nuclear material, it drops back down. And then additionally, that specific affair, we have a testimony from a former employee that is very long-winded that talks about how he was pushed out by Zalman Shapiro. And then when he didn't know what to do, he went to his union because the union bosses were pretty big by then. He goes to the union and then union goons were sent to his house to basically tell him the same thing Zalman showed him, which is shut up, don't talk about it.
Okay, so two questions for you. What is your point about, I'm not sure, what is your point about the Israelis gaining a nuclear weapon vis-a-vis the fact that the Pakistanis and India and a handful of other countries in the world have done the same thing to become nuclear powers? Okay.
The thing is that the argument is we sit here and say our greatest ally, when our greatest ally literally stole, lied, and cheated their way to being a nuclear power from us, and we also covertly protect them by maintaining a U.S. policy of ambiguity. We're also asking Iran, in these current situations of war, they need to be monitored for their nuclear program. They need to be under all this jurisdiction. The world needs to know what's going on with them. But Israel, not even a signatory of the NPT. It is hypocritical at best and is nefarious at worst.
All right. So does it make any qualitative or moral difference that Iran said, if we get a bomb, we're going to use it on Israel, when Israel is saying we're not using it on anybody unless we get attacked? This is a deterrence weapon, and this is a defensive weapon.
It's an interesting point by Chuck to say that Iran, at least somebody in Iran, seems to be saying we are
They're not
death
seem
to
be-
America.
That, not only death to America, but
But
death to Israel, and that if they get a bomb, that they're going to use it. Does that make any difference?
That's just a lie, though. And I'll use your argument against you. Khamenei himself has pushed for the Islamic State to not pursue nuclear weapons. It's not been until now with the enrichment of uranium.
But they were enriching uranium. They were saying, "Screw you." Even the International Atomic Energy Commission said, "Hey, they're going to cross the enrichment threshold. Why if they don't want a bomb, don't enrich." It's that simple. Because if all you wanted was peaceful nuclear power, there's peaceful nuclear power all throughout the world. You know what they do? They bring in the uranium. You use it. They take the uranium out. Good on everybody. That there's no reason for the Iranians to spin up with centrifuges unless they wanted one thing, which is a nuclear weapon, and they all said that they were going to use it in death to Israel.
And here's the thing. The peaceful nuclear program does not provide nuclear weapons. Japan does not have a nuclear weapon, but they're in the civil and civilians nuclear program. But that's not the point. You're arguing for why certain world powers should be nuclear powers and why others shouldn't. And I'm saying you have to morally say why that certain group of people should not be allowed the same level of influence as other nations. I'm saying, tell me why we are allowed to discriminate against certain nations and not others. And also the premise that the absolute flawed and god-awful premise that Islam is any worse than Jews or Judaism, or that Israel wasn't founded on terrorism and they have not been a terroristic organization their entire existence is insane. They are just as bad, and we as America should view them co-equally as bad. Both of them are bad. And the right answer to the nuclear program is that nobody should be armed in the Middle East. All of them are terrorists. Nobody should be nuclear weaponized at all in the Middle East. And the reason why is we can't say it, because the moment that we do that, Israel's going to open up all of the reasons why we have been a party to the fact that we basically allowed them to get there. All the blackmail comes out. And again, why do you think the Epstein thing is such a debacle? Why do you think they refuse? It is because the government is the Epstein list.
Okay, let me go back to a couple of points that you just made. Okay, so if you want to talk about Israel being a terrorist state, well, you could make the same argument about the United States in terms of what we did to Native Americans, okay, in terms of what we did in terms of slavery. If you want to talk about how Israel, quote unquote, used that level of terrorism to start the nation, that's not saying that doesn't absolve Israel of any of those elements. Okay, but it doesn't. But you can make the same argument about the United States as we sit here today. I don't know. Are you saying that Israel stole land from Palestinians and used terrorist tactics?
Welcome to 2025, Chuck. Yes, they did, and it was given to them by the Balfour Declaration when they had no ability to give that land over, and it was post World War II.
So if you're going to call them a terrorist state, you could say are you ready to make the same argument about the United States?
I have, and I will. America is, we are the empire. I say this all the time on the show. The worst realization I had as an American citizen was waking up and realizing we were holding the E-11 blasters and I was in a stormtrooper outfit. We are enemies to the rest of the world. And you can see this. Let's go with the historic coverage of Israel. Why is American coverage single-handedly the most pro-Israeli by almost 20 plus percentage points since the beginning and founding of Israel? The rest of the world views Israel as the terrorists they are, and we don't.
Okay.
Really?
Wait, hold on.
Wait, let me go, but I want to respond, but go ahead, John.
I forget what I was going to say. Go ahead.
You know, I'm kind of curious when you look, well, all right, there are two things that I want to, and I want to go back to one thing that you had said earlier. Okay. If you look at the United States as being the problem, did I just hear that from you, or how are you viewing?
Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. You reminded me. I am not a terrorist. I'm American. Okay. I didn't go anywhere ever and do anything to anyone. However, I would agree that the American government has done that many times. Yeah, we've been assholes.
We are 100%.
But I probably would have killed a bunch of Indians if I was alive then and would never thought twice about it, if I'm being honest. But I didn't do that shit. So Atlas, back to you, the question would be, and whoever wants to go first here, is it all of Israel? Or is it their government and their intelligence apparatus?
Well, I would argue that it's definitely not all Jews. I mean, you have Jewish elements and categories here in the United States that are up in arms with the way that Israel's behaving, and luckily because they have access to internet. But in terms of like Israel, the thing is like, yes, I mean, like the overall thing with Israel is the fact that like out of the three terrorist organizations, the paramilitary organizations, there's two of them, Lehi and the Irgun, were labeled as terrorists. Haguna weren't. So Haguna was able to leverage the fact they weren't called a terrorist organization to be I can't remember the name of the organization that became, but it was the receiver of all of these smuggling operations. So that the Haguna became the kind of mouthpiece for them. And what you find is leaders and officers out of these terrorist organizations end up later becoming prime ministers. They become ministers of defense. They become ministers of the state. They become all of these different roles in the government, and that includes David Ben Gurion. That includes just lost the tip of my tongue. But yes, I would argue, and specifically so, especially if you look at the forever wars in the Middle East, there was no reason for America to be there. And then if you go to World War One, now looking back with history, most people argue that the United States didn't even need to enter World War One. We had no reason to enter World War One. And even looking back on it now, is you go to like the USS Sussex, right, which was like a French vessel floating in a English channel that was shot by a German submarine that killed a couple United States citizens, and then now we're at war. We're going all the way across the pond. And it's like, no, if you look at the Balfour Declaration, they promised America would enter World War One on behalf of giving Israel the state of Palestine.
All right. So we're back to Israel. And I asked you, do you look at the United States as being its own quasi-terrorist element because of what we do? Are we the problem in the world? Are we the empire? Or what are we here? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's a yes. Based upon, can you give me some specifics and why?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the American government's terrorist to its own civilians, to its own peoples. And given the fact that, yes, if you look again.
How specifics, please. Because you can't just drop these broad things as though you can't drop broad statements like this as though they are unquestionable God truth and then move on with them. Give me some examples of what you're saying.
Before the example,
if you want to be specific, you could look at the extraction of wealth element, right? We talked about this at length with the Social Security Ponzi scheme, all of these 401ks, pension funds, things that don't exist. That would be similar to what you would see in a crime syndicate, which is basically an extraction of wealth from the people, from the regular workers, the working class, the poor class, and the money funnels upwards. I mean, like the U.S. government operates as a crime syndicate. If you were to take the labels off and you were to look at the way the money flowed from people, you would go, it's a crime syndicate. If you looked at the way that we behaved in the Middle East, you would look at us as a crime syndicate.
You can, but I wouldn't look at it as a crime syndicate. And that's your prerogative, and that's your right to do that. And it gives you power to do that. And I totally get it. And I totally understand that. But, go try living in an Islamic country. I want to circle, and I'm going to tie these 2 points together to you. Okay. You're telling me, well, Islam isn't any worse than the Jews. Bullshit. And you know how much work. Okay. Do you want to go take a look at what ISIS does on a regular basis if they didn't go unchecked? That's not what's happening here in America, and it's not what happens throughout the rest of the world. It's easy to vilify the United States. And I'm not necessarily saying I like what happened with Social Security necessarily. Okay. And I've said that before, but to equate somehow what happens with Social Security is what ISIS ends up doing if they go unchecked is a moral equivalence that you're welcome to make it. And I'm welcome to look at you and go, that's effed. And the reason why I say that is this. It almost seems today that both on the left and the right, that people have said to themselves, there's a perfect world that could exist if we could just get rid of this shit and get there.
That's
I
true.
got news for you. There's never, you know what? The people that tried that, people like National Socialists with Nazi Germany, the Marxists who tried that left a trail of corpses that probably are close to 200 million. There's no perfect world. There are trade-offs. only trade-offs, and you will
So
never
you
get
just
your.
pick which your favorite terrorist organization is. So you like the Jews, and I guess I'll like Islam
I
then.
don't like
Is
the
that what we're
Jews and
doing?
haven't.
Because what we're not going to do is not treat Israel like it's not a terrorist organization when it literally
Okay,
was made up of 3 of them.
okay, but what I see functioning today, okay, you could say the same thing, that we were a terrorist organization in the United States Army in terms of what we did to all the Native Americans here in order to get there.
Colonization is
Okay,
this is an
but
argument about colonization now.
where we are today, I treat Israel today like you treat America today. If you thought America was truly this corrupt terrorist, we took everything that we have through these terrorist activities, then we probably should be paying for that, but we don't. Where we see Israel today, okay, is the Israel that I'm dealing with.
Oh, this is interesting.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay. I get what you're saying. Keep going.
Okay, is the Israel that I see today. Okay, and frankly, when you talk about, well, they ran guns to these 3 terrorist organizations that probably did this. It was the same thing that gave you the position to sit with your microphone here in peace in America. There's probably a hell of a lot of parallels of some really despicable shit that people did so that they could get a homeland for themselves and a place for their people to go, considering that they had to figure out how many of them survived the Holocaust. I'm not saying it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's what's interesting.
I'm not saying that it's okay. What I'm saying is this is what happens in an imperfect world in which you don't have the ultimate control, that you have an illusion that is out there for you to get.
Are you? So you're. It sounds like you're kind of saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. That you do agree Israel is acting in its own interest, and that they will
Absolutely.
do so subversive. Hold on. They'll do so subversively, even where the United States might be their victims. But you don't see that being wrong in the same way
Well,
as the United States. Like that's just the way the world works. You're saying.
so
And
here's
people are allowed to be on their own side.
people are, and we're on our own side. And I'll agree with you. Does Israel take the wheel and jerk it in their direction? 100%. 100%.
Okay, I'm with you now.
I'm 100%. And I
Well, if you're
think that
going
they
to
get.
bring me my argument, what are we even doing here?
No, hold on a second. But here's what I'm saying. What I feel that you're doing, Atlas, is that you're saying, and I think I heard this in the beginning, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong. It is moving. They take the wheel and move it in their direction. It feels like you're saying that they're always steering the wheel in their direction so much that the United States people are having to so much of what happens when the government has to funnel through Israel before it gets to the American people. And that's where I have the problem. Okay.
I don't even think it's a hard thing to say. I mean, who controls the oil fields in the Middle East? Do we get oil from Israel? Do we
Okay.
do who has the rich minerals? Is it Israel? Do we mine with Israel? Do we have exorbitant trade with Israel outside of guns and intelligence? No, we don't. So even in its geopolitical strategic sense, the better ally to make there would be with Qatar.
But we are allied.
We can't even get right, barely, which we had to make Netanyahu apologize off a piece of paper for striking them. Did we sanction Israel for that?
Well,
no. And would we sanction any of the other Islamic states for hitting Israel? We certainly would. And then here's my, additionally, we'll go even beyond that. You keep saying this thing of like, okay, everyone can act in their self-interest. Let's grant that as broad as we can. Okay. So then what is your argument then for why Islam can't act in its interest? Right? Where does that buck stop then with you? And here's the thing, and additionally, and even on top of it, no, we're not leaving this point. Because what you keep doing is you keep saying colonization. You go to the colonization element. But I'm saying to you, you point and you look at these guys who's got towels on their heads, who use they strap bombs to their chest, to do, ridiculous means of warfare. And I would grant that. But here's the thing. If the United States Army started attacking American citizens using drones and all the elite warfare it had, and all we had were like ropes, cans, and 9mm, we would look just as lopsided as those people do today. And it'd be very easily to say, look at their guerrilla warfare tactics, look at the way that they rage out, they're barbarians, they're savage. Why won't they just accept accepted. And you have bought in fully to what Frank Lutz and Karl Spielvogel had set out to do, which was they changed the entire focus of this about ideology and not territory. You keep changing the guard. They didn't have the right to give in that territory. There were already Palestinians living there, there were Christians living there, and there were Jews living there. They already had civilization there. And what the Great Britain and Germany helped facilitate too, and as well as the United States, they facilitated the Nakba. They facilitated a genocide, right, of all these people who were there. And it continues to this day. But you keep roping in you rope in the Holocaust, like it's a bad element, but then you say, but this one's good. So I'm asking you, can you please define me what makes a good genocide, what makes a good terrorist, and when and how is someone allowed to defend themselves with a nuclear weapon?
I will. The first thing, though, you have to go back and say, and I don't want to lose sight of these 2 points.
Yep, we're with you.
Okay. Okay. Did you not a 9/11? Are you unaware of that?
No,
All right.
but
Now hold on a second. Hold on a second.
right off the bat, though, he did address that.
All right, but you say, why can't they work in their own self-interest? Because Islam says in the Quran, and they live by it, and the only reason why they don't do it is because there's enough force to push back on the world to them that they would kill the infidel and they would impose Islam on the rest of the world had they the ability to do it. Okay, so
what the Talmud says?
no,
Hold on,
I let you.
Let Chuck finish.
All right, so what you have with the United States, because we live in a global world that has global reach, okay, is that the United States does try to manage a very complex set of relationships so that shit doesn't go bad between Qatar and the rest of the world and Israel in that region, given what you said, minerals, oil, and everything else. And so this is the complex world of foreign policy, not the perfect world that you can create, meaning that I don't like the way things go. But you have two diametrically opposed interests in that area for which you have to figure out how to make the balance, which means you're probably going to cut the baby in half in ways that people don't like. And you can shit can all that you want. But let me tell you what it has done for you. It has given you the stability throughout the world in a very unstable situation to be able for you to live in an America that by and large has everything it wants to give you the opportunity to sit on your microphone and say what you want, which you really probably would not have anywhere else in the Middle East outside of Israel. And the second part of it,
microphones in Iran. Did you wake up in 2010? Where are we right now, Chuck?
How far do you think somebody in Iran is going to get saying what you say against the Iranian regime?
How far would they get?
No, not very far. Okay.
Israel saying something against the Israeli regime.
All right. Well, but
if I say something anti-Semitic in Israel, do you think you'd ever hear from me again?
Well, they're far more Western than Iran is.
I think
Western just means secular. It just means Jewish secular. That's what the West means. It doesn't mean Christianity, and that's part of the point. And I would argue the fact you want to see, I got some quotes from the Talmud. You ready? The mother of Jesus played the harlot with carpenters.
Okay, but I don't want to hear the Talmud.
A bastard, having been born from a forbidden union with a married woman. Third, the seducer was a soldier by the name of Panthera. Jesus was in Egypt in early manhood. Jesus learned magic in Egypt and performed his miracles by
at the very beginning? You need to
down the line.
Right now.
Calm down.
All right.
Everyone
Christ. They hate
right now.
They are not an ally of this nation.
All right. Hold on. Everybody pause. Everybody pause.
Gentlemen, you have forgotten that I have the largest dick in this debate.
All right.
You will respect that.
So Talmudic Judaism is what it is, and it has very little impact on the world at the moment. Okay. Israel is a secular democracy, and I understand that. And I don't have any qualms with saying that. But I want to go back and talk with you about what you said about Israel's founding. You're right. Okay, there were Arabs, there were Palestinians, there were Muslims, and there were Jews living in that area. And the United Nations and other whatever did what they did. Okay? If you think that that was a crime and you want to hold that against modern day Israel, then go live in another country because we did the same damn thing.
But you're comparing them to Native Americans. The people who were living in Palestine weren't sitting around with teepees and bonfires. They had homes, they had societies, they had villages. They were already up to par with where we were.
your argument just
Hold
fell
on.
apart right
No,
there.
I want to.
Because
Chuck,
the Native
I'm
Americans
unclear.
had the very same thing.
Well,
They
I'm
had their own
unclear. Are you
society.
saying the Native American thing was bad, or it's just
I'm
something
saying
that happens?
no. I'm saying what we did to the Native. I'm saying what we did to the Native Americans is exactly what happened that happened to the Palestinians and the
No,
other
it's
people
not.
living
We
in there at
bought
the time.
land from the Native Americans. As shitty as it might have been, and as much as we've been ripping
Yeah,
them off,
we
we at
didn't buy
least had more peaceful
land.
negotiations with Indians here than what we
Oh,
did than
we
what we
didn't
did in
negotiate
Palestine.
shit. We kicked them off. We moved in. We poisoned them. We put smallpox. We put them on reservations.
I know you were there, Chuck, but don't say we, because
All
I
right.
wasn't there.
All right. But America did that. All right. If there
Right.
were land, if there were small purchases here or there, but by and large, we came in and we took it by force. Okay. We absolutely took it by force. And so the same thing happened in Israel. I'm not saying either of those were right. But what I'm saying is you've got two different sets of criteria. You know, you're all willing to shit can Israel over what happened. Great. But why are you going to sit here and just sit and act like it wasn't so bad here in America?
Keep dodging this. It's making me mad. What is this argument you made just there? Is not. It's just delusion. I'm saying you keep placing Islam as if they are in a special S tier of being terrorists. And Israel's actually down here, and America's down here. But Islam, even though they have less access to conventional weapons, they have less access to just overall infrastructure, logistics, and intelligence. They're somehow worse terrorists. They need more control over these world powers. That's my point. My point is that I'm not condemning one and I'm cool with the other. My point is that how are you viewing the one who is the weakest one in the room as the one that needs the most control, the one that needs reined in the most, the one that needs dictated to them how they're allowed to defend themselves? I'm saying, how are you making that argument?
Who's saying Islam? I think
Islam. Well, unless if you're gonna talk about nuclear weapons, I'm bringing this in. I mean, if you like, is a nuclear weapon a way to? All right. What I think we really should do with this, if we want to continue, is that you give me a list of the terrorists. You give me a list of the acts of which you say, in terms of Israel, is
that would be good.
Of terrorism.
That would be good.
Okay. And let's do it over the last maybe 20 some years. And then we could take a look at those, because I want to know how much of this is what you consider terrorism is the Israelis actually defending themselves within larger context.
Dude,
yeah. Here we go.
Reading right out of the dictionary.
All right. No. Hold on, because the statement is true. If the Arabs would put down their arms against Israel, you would have peace. If the Israelis put their arms against the Arabs, Israel wouldn't exist, and we know that to be true.
And we also know the most widely accepted first ever act of terrorism was committed by these Israeli paramilitary groups when they bombed the King David Hotel, killing 91 people in an attempt to kill one of the British ministers who was trying to, and was a wedge, I can't remember what he did specifically, but was in the way of them founding the nation state of Israel.
Okay.
I mean, they bomb people indiscriminately, civilians die. I mean, like, what else do you want? It's like 174 journalists have died in Palestine since the Gaza war re-kicked off. I mean, women, children, countless. I mean, like, the numbers aren't on your side, Chuck.
Okay, so
if you want to do this, we can
address that. Okay. When Israel went in, it told everybody to get the hell out. And what is Hamas doing? They put their military, whatever they're doing, they put under a hospital and a school. And the Israelis went through and literally said, we're going to bomb it, get out. We're going to bomb it, get out. We're going to bomb it, get out. You got to get out.
Okay, so if someone came here and bombed America and they told you to get out, would you just leave? You would just leave America if we were under attack, is what you're saying.
That much of a fucking animal? That is a war crime. To put your military underneath schools and underneath hospitals and underneath civilians is a freaking war crime.
Israel's done similar when they were getting struck. When they were getting struck heavily, when Iran was sending back on, I think it was wave 8 or 9 of sending back the missiles back and strike in the 6-day war, or the 12-day war, I should say. Israel moved their main infrastructure center, because the first one got hit. They moved it under either a school or a hospital. But my
Okay,
point back to you is again this: if it's a territory dispute, if America was being bombed right now, Chuck, would you leave? If someone told you if China comes over, they're bombing the shit out of America, and
That's
they
a good
said
point.
leave. Your
Well, no,
argument, we're making the argument right now that you should leave. The right
no,
thing for that
no,
person is to
no.
leave.
What they told them to do was leave the building that was going to get bombed. They didn't say leave Gaza.
Oh
So
my
when you
God.
talk about all these
And
civilians
where
that are
else are they going to go in Gaza that's not been bombed, Chuck? Can you show me on the map where Gaza Strip's not been bombed?
exactly, but you know what happens when
Oh
they
no,
tell you
not
they're gonna bomb a
exactly. They have
building?
nowhere to go. They don't have access over their own borders. They can't. They
Then
can
why
leave. They can
does
move around the
Hamas
territory,
put
but
their
it's all
people?
being bombed.
Okay, why does Hamas put their people through this then? Well, you look, you
What are
know
you
what?
talking about? Hamas is the downline lineage of the group of people who first got their nation taken from them in the first place. My overall point to you was, of course, they're at this point where they have any means necessary. It's the people who have been there from the beginning. It is generations upon generations of sons who have been killed at the hands of Israel. And you expect them not to hate Israel? Like they want their land back. They had the rightful ownership to it before the
I totally
declaration was made.
But
Balfour
look,
Declaration.
so well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. I totally understand. And I'm not saying that the way that the nation of Israel was formed, that the taking of that land was in and of itself. I understand the rationale at the time, but it was taking of land like what we at this point in time would not want to see done to anybody anywhere.
Right.
But Hamas, but if Hamas is going to do what they have done for, and this even, and I grew up with the PLO. Okay.
Sure.
I was underneath the PLO.
Well, Yasser.
And with Yasser Arafat, who was bombing not only Israel, but bombing America and other interests. Okay. Is that if they're going to say, we're going to destroy you any way we can, and that they're going to end up looking at this and saying, you know, there's only other way to put it. They don't give a shit about the people of Gaza, because the amount of money that they have been given in terms of aid, like they were given well pipe, all right, to be able to put into the ground, and they turned that well casing, they turned into rockets. So if that's the degree to which they're going to continue to fight, if that is the way, if they're going to be given hundreds of millions of dollars worth of aid that they're not going to put into their people, then they're going to get
aid that they wait for them to gather before they bomb all of the aid. Are you talking about the guys who've been notoriously shot in the back of the head? Are you talking about the Palestinians who were raped?
I think
They
we
were
have
raped,
arrived.
and they cheered it. They had a riot.
you're going to, all right.
I think we've discovered we need to have sources for this on the next talk too. I don't know that what Chuck's saying, what Ask's saying, how true they are. Did they put their military under a hospital and a school? Yeah, I remember reading that. I also remember reading
the
it.
Israelis came through and they
Chuck, I do. To be fair, I remember reading that in like the New York Times, which I don't believe a word of anymore. So I'm just saying, I don't unbelieve you. Like, it probably did fucking happen from what I've read, but I also don't know. So maybe, well, Atlas gets his stuff for the terrorist acts. If we both, you know,
if
school,
you want to,
let's see what sources we have for that.
well, we can. I think that there is a, you know, what I really see at work here as we have this discussion is, that was me.
Chuck, why is Israel? Because I say Israel.
He's
My
getting the
bad.
call. They're going to tell you to not debate me anymore.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
No, you seemed like you were making a serious point there, Chuck. I wanted to hear it.
And I think this is
my God, was that really Israel?
no, it was Israel.
Did they tell you to stop?
You know what it says? I got a text message.
I can't read.
You know what it says? It says they're going to bomb the building. We need to get the hell out.
I'm staying, Chuck. This is my home.
Which they?
What I end up seeing happening is my life experience, and I'm just going to put it out here this way.
Yeah.
Okay. And just walk through this with me, Atlas. Okay. One of the ways in which we won the Cold War, and it was this was legitimate. Okay. Is the United States made all kinds. China is China today because Kissinger and Nixon made, and I think it was a very right, just walk through this with me, a very right decision that they wanted to separate China and the Soviet Union from each other. They did not want to consider, not even from a war standpoint, but an economic military standpoint of a China and the Soviet Union working in concert together, especially through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So what we did was we split China off from each other. And we decided that we were going to, and this was Deng Xiaoping coming off of Mao, recognize that China needed they needed to grow economically. And we made it happen because we had said that if we could separate the two, then it would make the Soviet Union almost impossible for it to sustain itself long term. We isolated the Soviet Union. The other way we isolated the Soviet Union. And when you talk about wealth being redistributed as you did before, which I won't necessarily argue with you, one thing, just hear me out on all of this.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Coming out of the post-war years, you're like, well, the boomers stole everything from us. Well, it's more complex than that because coming out of the post-war years, the whole freaking world was bombed. All right. The whole first world lay in rubble. And the United States had our untouched factories. We produced cars and washing machines and food to the world that was starving post-war. And we shipped it all out and they paid us for it. And that's what gave us this post-war economy. And you know what we did? We looked at the world in the 50s, particularly coming out of the Korean War, and we said we could maintain this ascendancy and we could really protect this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to tell the rest of the free world who is considering whether they're going to be a democracy or whether they're going to be or whether they're going to align with the Soviet Union. And we're going to tell them we're going to relax our markets and we're going to trade with you and we're going to run trade imbalances. And we're going to let this ascendancy that we have be spread throughout the world. And what we're going to do is we're going to patrol the shipping lanes. We're going to be the world's policeman, and you're going to profit. Okay. So this a juggernaut of an economy and this world dominance that we had that allowed that post-war guy to have a job and have a house and put his kids, we're going to allow that to dissipate to other countries in the world because we're going to tell them you align with us and not with the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union will tell you that that is one of the biggest things that led to their downfall because they couldn't keep up economically. We screwed ourselves and we allowed China to rise because we felt that was a better thing than being in constant military butting heads militarily like we did in Vietnam. And by and large, we were correct. But what it did is it weakened us. But it's a trade-off. Follow me, I'll wrap this up. This is a trade-off. Do you keep our ascendancy and then run the risk of war or nuclear exchange? Or do we go a different route? And do we accomplish the goals that we want over a long period of time that maybe, how do I put this? That is going to be, it's always a trade-off. So what I'm saying to you is, you guys seem to think that when you look back over these things, like you can pull from this high moral position and say, if I was in charge, this shit would have never happened, or this was wrong, or this was effed, or this was bad, or yeah, welcome to the world. And that doesn't mean that it's right. But what I'm saying to you is that even if you had the power that you wanted, you would still not have the world that you think you could have, because it's that complex and you're dealing with so many different elements that you don't get the perfect world that you think that you could have. And I'm going to conclude with this. I'm coming from that standpoint. I won't argue that Israel doesn't have great influence. I won't argue that what happened in that Israel being set up as a country was not the right thing to do. I won't argue that. Okay. It wasn't the right thing to do in its day and its time. And I won't argue with you that what happened in Gaza is shitty, but there's shit flying on both sides. And you do not get perfect solutions that you can create in your mind. It's more complex than that. And I think
What
we
I
are
would
fighting we have the two different worldviews that are at work here.
For sure.
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad that you said it like that because it helps my argument too. And it would be this: I would think that in your guys' conquest, your generation's conquest to ascend, you didn't realize you were climbing the Tower of Babel on the way up there. And I would say that it's actually evidence that the fact that America, the nation itself, was falling away from Protestantism and falling away from Christianity in general. And I think this idea, this belief, to build a society to just be the best society, to continue pushing for that, I think misses the entire point of the Tower of Babel. It misses the point of why we're here on this earth. And I think this actually underpins a lot of the reasoning of why I think a lot of you guys are caught off guard is because you underestimate just how much Christianity is pushing this movement, of which I am a part of, to retake the values of what America is. And yes, that's why I'm so quick to say, yes, I find America to be an evil empire, one of which I wish I could wash my hands clean of, the blood of, that you see and read about constantly day in and day out. I think America has contributed to a lot of the global homo new world order. And I think a lot of it has been done because of Schofield's subversion with Christianity, birthing Christian Zionism, which is then, and then you adopt feminism and everything else that I would also argue does come from the same source. This is where we are. And this is the point: is everything that you guys were attempting to build, pushing for, and wanting and willing was a secular Western, in my opinion, Jewish worldview. And that is not what we want. I don't want that. I don't want to be rich. I just wanted my country to honor God. It's like, this idea of like having multi-million-dollar mansions and all these homes, like, sure, it would be nice. But I think the overall element and push and goal of America is to be the Christian nation the founding fathers said it to be. No foreign entanglements, and everything your generation fought for was to basically get it attached and involved with the world as humanly possible.
Well, you say my generation when you can, but you have no idea who I am or what I have done or how I have lived. So
I
it's
think
not
that goes
necessarily
both ways.
my generation. But let me go back to where we can have some ability to move forward in this in dialogue. Okay. Let me I got to think this through.
Where's Zeb? Where's Zeb with the plug fillers?
Just had
Go ahead.
Zeb had to go pee-pee. So
Okay.
I'm filling in the meantime.
So he's sitting down.
See,
He is, yes.
You and I agree on the downfall of, and this is what I continually write about, is we are entering into our post-Christian era in the United States. Okay. We're entering our post-Christian era, but I will maintain this to you. You have the ability to have the position that you have and the opinion you have because of what time you were born. I guarantee you that had you been born in the 70s, you'd have done the same damn thing everybody else did. Okay. Had you been born in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, you'd have been running the American dream. And because nobody wanted to listen when people were telling them what was happening. And that was top to bottom within the country. Whether or not you figure it was the Schofield Reference Bible or whether you think it was the March Through the Institutions, okay, that brought so much of what we on postmodernity and that led to us walking away from our Christian heritage. However you want to come at that, you and I would both agree that we need to recapture that. The question becomes how. Okay. And we could debate the level to which, and I think this would be actually profitable if you wanted to do this. We could debate the degree to which Schofield gave us this Jewish mindset within Christianity, or this Christian Zionism, which I agree with you inhabits parts of the evangelical church. It does not inhabit the rest of Protestantism. And by the way, it's not just the Protestant church in America, it's also the Catholics and the Orthodox. Okay. Because, and so, the degree to which we can because it does, all of the problems that we're experiencing today comes from the fact that we've departed from those. Not only was it because of Christianity that gave us the American worldview, but it also gave us the moral, the virtue that we used to live by in America, that were the boundaries that kept everything together and kept everything cohesive, move in the direction that you and I would want it to go. And I think that, so I'm going to end with this. I don't disagree with you about Schofield, and I don't disagree with you about Schofield's influence. However, I guess this is why I push back so hard, Atlas, because it almost feels like what you're saying to me is it's all this Zionism that led to the end of Christian our Christian values in America. I'm like, dude, I lived it. I lived, my grandparents were born in 1908 and 1904. They went through the Depression. My parents went through World War II. I had the view into what historically a Christian America looked like. And I lived through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s when we pissed it all away. And to whatever degree that was Christian Zionism, it sure as hell wasn't all of it. And if you're willing to consider that it ain't all Christian Zionism, which I think I think people must consider that. I guess to say this, what I chafe with is it feels like you're saying we all lost it because of this Christian Zionism. And I'm like, hell, dude, I lived it. And I could tell you it wasn't all Christian Zionism.
It would be sourced back, like things with like egalitarianism and feminism. Those things, though, distinctly do come from, Jewish individuals, right? And then were pushed and then propagated continually down the line by Jewish individuals over and over again.
Okay, so see, here's where we could debate. Because you could show me the number of Jews that I could tell you about, and I could tell you where feminism came from, and I could tell you where postmodernity came from, and I don't think any of them were Jews. Okay, Foucault, I don't know. Foucault was French, Derrida was French, Richard Rorty, all these people. So, but you just did it, and this is why I push back so hard. Because when I told you that, you played the fucking Jew card. You're like, well, they were Jews pushing it. They were Jews pushing it. And I'm like, there might've been some Jews, but you seem to, when you make it is like it was all Jews, and it wasn't all Jews. And I can tell you Jews because I lived it.
But you keep omitting what they believe. You keep omitting the fact that the Jewish Encyclopedia verbatim says, like, it became a Pharisaical religion. Right. It is a deformity. It is not anything that should be honored or respected and should be viewed as a false idol.
Okay.
Lewis, Marshall, many of these individuals who openly talked about how much they hated Christianity. And to think that didn't play a role, and to think that mindset's only in like specific elite Jews and nobody else, it's like, that's insane. It's clearly a base level viewpoint that they have. You can see it with what's his name, who pushed basically a lot of pornography in this nation. Is a famous quote. It was done all in an attempt to subvert Christianity because he hated them. You can find that statement and that fact consistent throughout history.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. So, if I agree that there were Jews who did that, I agree with what the Talmud, what it says about Christianity. I agree with you on all that. And I agree that what you had just talked about was a contributing factor. Why aren't you angry about what we know exactly? Why aren't you angry at like the non-Jews who were, because I got to be honest with you, how many Jews are in the United States? They're a tiny fraction. There are far more Marxist leftists today pushing this crap than the Jews. Why aren't we equally angry about that? Why are we always spinning back to the Jews, the Jews, the Jews? Why aren't we looking at the disproportionate level of, because this is one thing I'd like to do. I like to take a look at the number of Jewish faculty in America, if I can find this, that are pushing these viewpoints, and if we, okay, but I would encourage you to, because what's the Jew? Because even as we sit here today, and you could easily Google this, the Jewish element in the United States is a fraction of our population. I mean, can you look at how many Jews are in America?
But you're making my point for me.
Why?
So why, if they are a fraction of the population, how in the world are they also in control? Do they own multi-conglomerates between Oracle? They have control over OpenAI. They have control over Palantir. They are the dominant figures in Pornhub and pornography and OnlyFans. They are the dominant figures who own
So,
things in Hollywood. And so you're telling me point
all
blank,
right.
they are a tiny percentage of this our population, but they exist. They have an extreme overrepresentation in all near the levers of power, which is
Okay.
exactly what my argument is. That is a
All right.
supplantive argument to everything else I'm saying.
So what I would
The
like to
number,
see,
by the way, is 7.5 million,
the
2.4%.
2.4%. So I would like to see. So this is really why I'm pushing back. I'd like to see a list of who controls these, who are, and I would like to say not just Jewish, but not culturally Jewish, because you got a bunch of people like Nancy Pelosi calls herself a Catholic and a Christian. She's no more Catholic
No.
and Christian than anybody. Okay.
What's
So
culturally Jewish?
what's that?
What is culturally Jewish?
Well, people who will say, like somebody will say today, I'm Italian, but they don't function like an Italian family.
Yeah, but we know
You
what
know,
Italian culture is. What is culturally Jewish?
well, what I'm saying is you have people who say they are Jews, but they couldn't give a rip about Judaism, period.
So seculars?
Yeah, they're just secular Jews.
Okay.
Okay. And then I would say that and I would make the argument, and I don't know, if somebody is secularly Jewish and they're voting Democrat, they're probably supporting your position. They're not supporting Israel.
What?
If somebody is secular Jews, if somebody is secularly Jewish, they've been born a Jew, and they don't go to temple, they don't go to Torah, they don't practice, they don't give a damn. It's like it's like a Catholic. You have Catholics that are born Catholic, and they never go to church. They vote Democrat. They don't give a damn about Christianity. They vote Democrat, and they push. You got Catholics pushing the transgender ideology. So, but they were born Catholic, but are they truly Catholic? The point I'm making is I would like to know, just because somebody's the head of a country and happen to have some percentage of Jewish blood through their lineage, does that actually make them this rabid Jew who is controlling everything, wanting to promote Israel's interest? And I would argue that you can't assume that.
Well, I said at the beginning, I don't think Jews are a monolith. But even of the different factions that do exist, I mean, the seculars are no better than the Orthodox or the Talmudic or the rabbinical in general. And that's another argument, which is, where did this kind of secular liberal idea come from? How did that become so prominent in America? We don't call people who don't believe in Christ pagans in America. We call them what? We call them atheists, agnostics. All of this
Totally.
stuff that came from this hollowing out of Christianity, right? This kind of flattening of
Right.
Protestant beliefs that occurred. And you said it yourself, through the 70s, 80s, 60s, civil rights era movement, all of this kind of egalitarianism, all of this moving away from like Christian values, Christian beliefs, into something that wasn't that, into something that was more world order, something that was more egalitarian. And then you introduce other things, right? You look at the transgender stuff. Which of the religions talks about the multiple genders? Where do these ideas come from? And I would argue to you too, I actually openly encourage you to look up single thing that you just said, because you're not going to be happy with the answer that you find. Or maybe you'll be enlightened by the answer that you find. I don't know.
Let me go back to what you were saying. It feels to me as though you're attributing all of the secular downfall to the Jews in America, to the Jewish
Vast majority of it, yes. Yeah.
I lived it. You can't. It is, and see, this is the frustrating part to me. Okay, you're totally, when you can look at me and go, well, you should look into this. Well, you should look into what happened within our universities, that at the 2% of the population could not accomplish. 2% of the population could not accomplish that on their own. There are not enough Jews. There are not enough Jews. There are not enough Jews numerically to fill every position and every institution within academia in the United States.
And you don't need to, because you have the highest positions on lock. And like we tried talking about earlier, that you didn't know about, was going about the FBI director and Hoover. We're talking about Untermeyer facilitating blackmail over Woodrow Wilson, over an affair that he had at Princeton University. We have I mean, you could just go down the line. Epstein, right? Epstein's the most overt
Right.
and public and obvious example. You don't need everyone. You don't need them to proliferate and be ranks. But if you control the media and you repeat a lie so many times, people will repeat it themselves, whether they are of your faith or of your ethnicity or not. So when you control the media, you control the majority of Hollywood. You are, and think about this: do you know how many World War II movies do we have, and how many Passions of the Christ? Right? It's like you could find all of these different examples throughout there where it was subversion, and it went along with the march to the institutions. The march to the institutions wasn't just communism. It was also pushing secular Judaism and other Talmudic principles too, but all in an attempt to subvert Christianity to an extremely
No,
weak point. And the
you can't
only
do
strong element of it now is the side that feigns support for Israel day in and day out.
Let's
No.
close this thing about 5 minutes. Go for it.
So this is why, right here, why I push back so hard on you, because you attributed so much to Judaism, okay, that it could not accomplish. There were Jews in high positions and Jews in high power. Yes, but I would challenge that you're going to have to show me that the Jews in high positions and Jews in high power, okay, were these Jews that were specifically wanting to subvert this for the cause of Israel. But the role, what happened with secularism in America, okay, can be tracked. I mean, you know, you look at me and go, well, this stuff's obvious. The other side of the coin is equally obvious. You haven't looked into it. And as much as I haven't looked into what the things that you're talking about, but
you're incoherent right now. I hope you know
I'm
that.
not
You're being
incoherent.
very incoherent.
No, I am not incoherent.
I think he's extending an olive branch, honestly.
I am not incoherent. And what I'm saying to you is that you are so fixated on, for whatever reason, on attributing all of it to Judaism, just like you said, when Judaism does not have the numbers and the ability to control so much of the country that they're going to, there was so much else that had happened in America throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or going back to the 50s. Well, hell, even back to even in the early 1900s, okay, that played a far more larger role. And for me, I'm going to end with this. For me, this is why I fight, and this is why I push back against this so hard. That if you're unwilling to see all these other factors between Marxism and critical theory and postmodernity and process theology and all of these things that made it through our institutions that had nothing to do with Judaism, then, you know, you're shaking your head. I've read the sources. You're shaking your damn head. I've read the sources. Okay? And Judaism wasn't mentioned anywhere in them. Nothing.
I've read the Judaism, but the obvious thing is the push from this came from a majority of Jews. Like, I don't know how you can sit here and say communism, Bolshevism, feminism, egalitarianism, like these ideas didn't come from them. I'm like, they are the originators of these ideas.
They didn't come from Jews. Have you ever read Marx? Marx hated. Did you ever read Marx? Marx hated religion. Doesn't matter. And I say that because, well, you know what? He wasn't.
What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Because Marx's ideas came from Rousseau, and Rousseau was French. That's like saying he wasn't making no connection. So a Jew put out ideas.
No,
it was
France. If you were read up on this, who is the second largest Jewish diaspora outside of America?
Rousseau was not a Jew. Okay.
I'm not saying he was. I'm saying that the Jewish diaspora was largely concentrated in France and America. Previously also Germany too. But my point there was they were also instituting the same controls they were in America, also in France as well.
You know what? We're not going to get it.
How you like that 5-minute ending, Zeb?
All right. We're not
beautiful. All right, let's get to where is this? Let's get to the super chat. Super chats.
Okay.
Do it.
For this wonderful debate, I had to step out. I had to go send in a couple FOIAs to maybe get some information from the federal government that they're never going to give us. Just kidding. We got family things. Anyway, again, thank you, Atlas. Thank you, Chuck, for this debate. We'll probably do something to this effect a little bit later on. Maybe give us some time in between the debates to catch up. And obviously needs to be refined down. The topic does. This is the first one we've done that's relatively formal. So, Chad, I want to thank you for joining us and being here and sticking with it. Obviously, it got heated a couple times. Had a couple good conversations built in there, so we appreciate that. First super chat is, I'll read it, and then I guess it just depends on who it is for. We'll go from there. Filthy Angry Irish Peasant says, Roseanne Barr says Israel does not need the U.S. They can partner with India. Good luck with that. She is outing herself, loving the crash out. I guess I mean it's not really a question. We appreciate that. I guess the question would be a short answer from both of you. Does Israel need the U.S.?
Well, to start with, the comments that was made by Roseanne Barr there, also in that same video clip, I watched the clip of her saying this. She also added something to the effect of like, it will be America's downfall. And so she was like almost kind of halfway actively rooting for it. And it is this idea that if Israel falls, America's next. And, Iran literally can't even reach us with their ballistic missiles right now. So it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Chuck, does Israel need the U.S. to exist, essentially?
They need aid, and India simply does not have the economic ability to provide the level of support that the United States would have any country, period.
Sounds like a yes.
Sounds like a yes. Jackson says, what about Huckabee and Pollard? Question problematic. I think y'all covered this lightly. So if you want to touch on it, you can.
Yeah, well, I think this is actually indicative of the argument of the subversion of the religion. Why do you think Mike Huckabee has such a zealotry to get Pollard out? Well, it's because he loves Jewish people. That is what the Christian Zionism has given birth to. And this belief has kind of slowly devolved into basically these evangelicals who practice this, like, worship Jews. And you'll hear some of these rabbis saying that too. Why not just stop at one Jew with worshiping Jesus? You should worship us all.
All right. Next, we're going to go Simon. Thank you for the $2. He says, Zionist, Ashkenazi, Khazars, fake Jews. Appreciate the super chat, brother. Jackson back again says, why is he meeting a traitor, Chuck? Seriously. Oh, this is the same Pollard question.
Same Pollard. Why did Mike Huckabee meet a traitor? Chuck is his question. Pollard.
Well, I'd have to look into it.
Okay. That's fair. Thank you.
I told you I'd have to look into it.
Incredible. Yes. Great answer.
Boo Radley says, W Atlas, the dog ate someone's homework.
I don't know. I'm not really on board with that, honestly. I saw that document, Atlas. It was a goddamn PhD thesis with 75 cited sources. 2 days is a big ask.
I did it in 5 days. I feel like Chuck could too.
I was about to say I was very impressed at your off-the-cuff knowledge there. You clearly did every little bit of that. I look forward to Chuck throwing some shit at you that you're not as familiar with and seeing how you handle it.
I'm cool with it. We can run it back.
I would love to. Is there another one?
Boomers won't read, wants paperwork confirmation. I guess that's in the same vein.
It is. I'm going to respond to this.
Go for it.
This is in many ways, look, people can say whatever they want, but if you're going to just flip yourself into a position like this, are you going to allow people to say whatever they want to say about you without any kind of external corroboration about what they're saying? And the answer is no. And just because people are saying things that you're not, that go with the way you see the world, the minute that you start by saying, hey, well, you know, you want some external verification, it's not the world that you want to end up living in.
Couldn't we all agree that all of us on this debate, Chuck probably has the hardest job? Would we agree on that?
Yeah. I appreciate Chuck stepping up to the plate, man.
I don't think I could do what Chuck is doing right now, to tell you the truth. So, but let's take seriously the source thing. Let's give however much time it is that we actually need, and let's actually produce a real show with a real outline, with a real set of questions and time limits and things like that. If we find we need more time, then we'll do it again. But you both are clearly super knowledgeable, maybe in different areas or maybe different, you know, Atlas, obviously more current things. Chuck, you did live through all those things. I just think in 2 hours, it's way too fucking much. And it was also a blast.
Well,
it was also fun as shit, but.
Okay, so there's something in the chat here. It says we're talking about.
Don't read the chat, Chuck. It's
Hold
the
on
internet.
a second. We're talking about Jews, Chuck. Why are you personalizing it? And so, one of the reasons why I'm here is, I think one of the biggest reasons why I'm here is because, and I think this, what I had said at the very end, Atlas, this is far more complex than just saying the Jews. And if you want to say the Jews, great, that's up to you. But I'm fighting for you guys to help understand that this level of complexity, and this can't be solved by just saying this is one people over one place at one time. And if you're going to have any hope of making this work in America, if you're going to have any hope of recapturing this, I'd hope that you would listen to somebody who lived through it and studied it and has a perspective that you may not like. But if you're going to, and that's why I'm fighting with this. But it's up to you whether what you want to listen, what you want to accept.
I would like to add the caveat there that I would say 85%, maybe that's a little even a bit too high, 70 to 85%, somewhere in there. I acknowledge that there's other events that happen and fall outside of Jews. But there's a certain guy who won Time of the Year for specifically getting one group of people out of his country, and he won Time of the Year for the way his economy ran like a well-humming machine. I think just a year or two after he got all those people out. So I think there are examples that would oppose what you just said.
What do you mean about if we could get rid of all of the Jews, we'd be fine?
I'm saying there's already an example of that in history.
But what I'm trying, you can see that from your perspective, okay? And but I can tell you that this goes far beyond. There's so much of a body of literature out there and from history of how we got here in America that has nothing to do, with Jews. Like you had said, Karl Marx was a Jew. Okay. All right. But his father renounced their faith, and Karl Marx was raised as a secular individual. He wanted nothing to do with religion. And you're attributing to that to Judaism. When it's, and I think this is what I would try to explain to you. Was it Karl Marx's ideas or the fact that he was culturally or he was ethnically Jewish that led to the downfall of of so much of the world? And then the idea.
What's the difference?
What do you mean? What's the difference? If Karl Marx would have not written anything, would his Jewishness have done anything to the world?
No, but what came out was Jewish.
No, his stuff was not Jewish. His Marxist theory was not Jewish. Why?
It was Jewish.
No, why? Because
why we got to do this to ourselves 3 minutes before 6 o'clock?
Right.
I mean,
well, let me try to get into your mindset here. What makes what Marx's economics theory had? What relationship to historic Judaism from the standpoint of biblical Judaism does that have to do with anything?
Why are you foundationally basing everything on biblical Judaism? Old Testament Judaism, technically.
Well, so you mean?
Thank you.
The problem is you're erasing any type of racial, biological, ethnic aspect to any of this. And that's the problem. You're trying to take everything back to the Old Testament when it's simply not. I mean, Jews, you would acknowledge that they're good with money, would you not? Do they
Well,
just
I would
lose that when
acknowledge.
when they renounce their Judaism? Obviously not.
So let me ask you a question. So, um, so if I use your, if I'm reading you correctly, if I'm
Mhm.
reading you correctly, just because he happened to be a secular ethnic Jew, okay,
Mhm.
that we're going to attribute everything that happened in Marxism to Judaism.
Oh, no, not everything. I would say that
You're going to,
Marxism is quasi-communism. Communism is quasi-socialism. It all stems from the same tree.
well, it does, but why? But why does the fact that he happened to be a Jew and not just a human being who came up with the most murderous ideology, why is then all of that attributed to Judaism?
Because you deny race realism, I don't, and I don't think either does Zeb.
Because
I
we
think that there
all
are distinct. Go ahead.
we
You
all
know,
process information differently. We all process information differently. We all know this. I process things the same way my father does, and his father, and his father, his father. This is just how nature works. And so you are a product of your time to an extent, but you are more so a product of your parents. And so if we follow this line all the way down and we look at it and we say, oh, there's a cousin here, 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 and across the board, they all think the same way, and they all come to communism, socialism, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, which was built by Chinese Jews. It's, at some point you got to say, maybe the Judaism isn't really the issue.
well,
And
okay,
to add on top of that argument real quick, Chuck, just to add on top of it, they are unique in the fact of the way they are spread across all throughout the nations, right? There is a bit of a religious element that kind of compels that. And then you combine this fact, I mean, even in 1933, right, before World War II, they organized a boycott across the world. Right, the Daily Express from London, which was widely regarded as one of the most widely read newspapers of the time, was imploring Jews around the world to boycott Germany, showing that even in pre World War II, they already had this organized kind of Jewry that was worldwide. They already kind of had this international kind of connection, and because they all recognized in that fact, and some of them too much, they hyperbolize and exaggerate this kind of this victimhood. And that's one thing that kind of unites them as Jews, is they've been pushed out of all these nations. You hear it from Randy Fine himself, right? Kicked out of 109 countries, and it was never our fault. They adopt this mindset, and that's kind of what unifies them too, out of one of multiple things.
well, Zeb, going back to what you said, I think what the issue here is we're debating race essentialism versus non-race essentialism, and we're kicking around these facts that are going through these lenses. Okay, and so probably maybe what should happen is a bigger step back and to argue versus race essentialism versus a non-race essentialism paradigm first.
Is the question just, is behavior genetic? Is that the most basic form of the question here? I'm asking for real.
I guess
I
I
mean, I
would
would
word
say
it as,
yes.
yeah,
I get,
genetics
and you,
are the major, yeah, genetics and biology play the major role in determining behavior patterns.
See, I would fundamentally disagree with
fair.
that.
Yeah, this is a unsettled and
Set
ancient debate.
that debate up. I'll take
For
it.
sure.
But see
I'm not.
what okay, so if I am now, I think I'm understanding that you say Jews are Jews based upon their genetic lineage. Jews are Jews,
Matrilineal.
okay, and that Jews are going to act like Jews regardless of wherever they're at. And these Jews act in certain ways, and this is destructive to the larger world. And they just are always elevating themselves and destroying the world around them because they're genetically Jews and they just can't act any different. Is that fair?
I think that's probably what they would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're being
oversimplification,
a
but
bit
sure.
exaggerating, but yeah.
All right. So, but see, and this is why, I mean, I don't think that's, to me, I don't think that's necessarily biblical, nor do I think that's necessarily what I see happening within the world. So, and I think that, so what we're really doing is we're both pulling.
Tell me, which part isn't biblical?
What part isn't biblical?
Yeah.
The fact that
Like
people are,
biology?
no, No, the fact that individuals, that you're created as individuals within God. You're created as specific
Sure.
people. Okay. And
We have
that
agency, yes.
you don't say, okay. And that you are not bound. There's nothing in the New Testament that says that who you are as your genetic heritage
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm with
is
you.
dictates every. In fact, the New Testament says that's wholly different. So I don't think
No.
that you
Those-
Like a good Samaritan thing.
well, you in a sense a good Samaritan sort of thing, but I don't, you know. So really, what we probably should do with this is that we should, and I mean, this really, what this is this is your race idealism versus a non-race idealism approach. And I'm interpreting what I see through that lens, and you're interpreting what you see through that lens. And that's why we're talking apples and oranges here. That's why we're talking through this. And really the question should be, and Zeb, I've got and Atlas, I would have to read on this to really understand your positions on this versus mine. Okay.
It's a fair
Yeah, well,
request,
Yeah.
I think.
the very simple
Go ahead.
pushback to that would be the identity in Christ is categorically spiritual, right? But it doesn't also rope in the categorical temporal sense, you know. And so Paul actually writes about this too, like the idea that you know, identity in Christ removes all, you know, temporal differences here on earth is like no. And it's kind of the same way that you know, we discipline and punish certain sins, right? Certain sins, obviously all sins in terms of God are equal, viewed equally as God. You know, if you sin, you have to repent regardless of what that sin is. But there's still the idea that in the temporal sense, different sins will carry different weights depending upon the nature of the sin.
Sure. You know, yes. But I think that, like I said, again,
We can save it
this
for a
is,
debate.
you save it for a debate.
Yeah.
Save
And
it.
if you want to
Yeah,
do
we're
something
wrapping
like that, I won't be around for whatever you want to do next week. I'm going another round of deer hunting. So
Nice.
You
if you
killing
wanna-
some Indians, Chuck.
what's that?
You killing those Indians' pet dogs. You completing the genocide.
Just
we're
use
gonna go
something
to a-
bigger than the 30-06. I heard it stops.
Holy shit. Here I am trying to make a joke.
Nah, man, we don't. There wouldn't be a lot left. So,
funny.
so if you wanted to set something up like that, but I think this is more of the issue. I think this is more the larger issue than the specific facts themselves, because you're interpreting through them your lens, and I'm interpreting through a very different lens. And until you can come to an understanding of how those lenses are,
I think we can
as
still
relates to that.
I think we can still talk about facts and evidence if they're out there, because
I-
like, the why is irrelevant to the fact it happened or it didn't. So,
Right. And I there's going to be through this, I think, just to the point of looking at you going, hey, man, if you see it that way, that's the way you can see it. I think it's messed. But if that's your lens, that's your lens. And I don't have any problem doing that. But I think for me, as I said earlier, the hardest part for me in this is that so much of this happened outside of Judaism, plain, simple, and period, that is so documented from stem to stern. And that if you're just going to see this as a genetic ethnic thing, you know, man,
I for one would like to see that documentation.
what's that?
What you just said, how it's documented. Like I think we need to like you come with your guns fully loaded.
There would be a different kind of a discussion.
That's okay.
Well, because, you know, it's not a matter of, well, you could say something along the lines of when he says, did so-and-so meet with Mike Huckabee? Well, that happened.
Sure.
Okay. But what you have to show is, you know, this is a longer discussion where you show where the concepts of feminism came and where their original sources were and how they made it through our institutions that happened independent of people who weren't Jewish.
Yeah, that's what that's like. I want to hear you throw out a name and then Atlas throw out a name, and I want to find out who's right.
Well, can I ask you guys a question? This is where I'm coming from, and I think this is why I push back so hard.
Okay.
And I've said this before. So we talk about feminism. And do you think that if we got rid of all the Jews out of America that were supposed to have caused this, that would solve feminism?
Well, if we go back in
Um,
time, we would never have bikinis. If we go back in time, we would never have
right.
the rise of first wave feminism in the 20s. I mean, if we're
What-
removing ethnic Jews, we would never have the destruction of the dollar, if you will. So,
But where I would agree with Chuck, though, would be today, if we were to remove it, yeah, feminism doesn't disappear, but that's part of the subversion. They have grafted, Jewish ideals onto Christianity, right? And this is kind of the biggest barrier, is because I come from a biblical, Christian standpoint, and I go, all of what you guys say is good and is feministic is actually in direct contradiction to the Word of God. Right, so the Jews don't need to be present anymore. Their ideas have self-proliferated. They have grown beyond them. They have eclipsed needing to be continually propagated. However, I would say once they are removed, the things that hold it up will quickly disappear, and it'll be a matter of time before we are back to where we want to be as Christian nationalists.
they would
See, I
have to be
totally
removed, and the funding that comes with it from outside of the U.S. But yes,
okay, but so much faculty are not Jewish today, and so much of this element exists. I know how ideas work. It is not that simple, and that's the
what if
reason
their
I think.
funding comes from Jewish sources? Is that a cop out for you?
You mean what? We talking about funding of the left and the universities?
Yes.
Okay, you got to show me the dollar figure on that. You
Gotta do it.
totally
We got to
have
show.
show me the
pull
dollar
out our.
figure on
We got to
that.
DMC this for
So,
real.
As to how, for the of these billions of dollars that go into this and all this federal funding, that this is all Jewish money, and those are the things that I'm just going, okay, if you want to hash this out, we can, and I think it's reasonable to at least begin.
Can we give it at least one more shot, like once, before we start shooting guns at each other?
You want to do race idealism? You can,
I'm cool with that. If you want to zoom out and do race realism,
Let's do it. Let's get to it. Let's
Racialism.
get to the rest of these super chats real quick.
Yeah.
I'm-
all right.
I'll primary race realism with Chuck, I guess, as a negative, and then I guess Josh will be in house, so we could probably do that over here. Sounds like a deal. You want how long you want on those sources, Chuck? 2 weeks? 3?
It
you
might
got?
be 3.
3?
Because
Because you're not going to be here next week. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here next week. But you know what? If you can,
I'll have it to you
If
by the
you-
end of the week.
if you can send me your sources, and then you know what? Let's just be fair to everybody here, and especially the people that come into the chat who want to get something from this. Just send me your sources. Let's come up with kind of a guideline about what we'd like to do, and then I'll let you know how long it takes me to really feel like I'm prepared, and I'll send my stuff back to you.
I think that's fair. Remember, Chuck is not a full-time content creator. He has work and things like that in life, and kids and stuff.
so I would say for both
Unless
my
you send more
Discord
super
and
chats, then he will be. Go ahead.
Right.
Alex.
But I would say, yeah, it's a good idea. Anybody on either side, I have a special page on the Discord that says show submissions. Just post whatever URLs or one of the sources. Anybody. Same thing with Zeb.
I don't know that Chuck would use it, but we got to get him in the Discord, don't we?
Well, I'm
Yeah,
not going to be
anything-
doing it 3 weeks, so until I get everything.
All right, we
shut
got
down.
time. I like this. I
Okay.
like this plan. What a wonderful plan you communists came up with together in aggregate.
Sammy says, can we just settle this with a deepest voice contest and get it over with? I think everybody knows who wins that.
Word. Appreciate that, brother.
We conquered on our own. Israel needs USA. Oh, I in reference to
Your
Indians.
shit is a comma after own. An
Yeah,
implied one.
Thank
yeah,
you,
they needed help. We
friend.
didn't.
Subway station, Tehran, all about Jesus and Mary. Not sure reference.
There might be some like painting in a subway station or something. I don't know.
Thank you,
It's
Simon.
Spanish, I think. I was trying to understand it.
Yeah, it was. It is. I don't know if it's Spanish, but it's something. They got the tildes. Mr. Peasant says it is the dollars and not influence. Not dollars
Jesus
and
Christ.
influence, not population.
Okay.
I'm going to send you Hooked on Phonics, you bastard.
Everybody knows I can't read.
That's funny.
It is
I
the
can read
dollars influence. It's not even on the screen, Zeb. It's the dollars and the influence, not the population. That was the comment.
There you go. Killed it. Good job. Let's see. What is a Jew from Pope John? Also, Pope John became a member today. Thank you for that, sir.
Nice.
What
Hey,
is a Jew? I think
congratulations.
we just had that discussion. Well,
Yeah, covered that pretty
Yeah.
thoroughly.
Both racial and religious
Also,
in both
my
at
one
the same
kind of little bit of input here as the linguistic autistic person is I think we still throw around terms too loosely, like Jewish, Zionist. Gotta be careful about what we mean when we're saying which one. That's my 2 cents.
Word.
It's a good comment.
Be
yeah.
specific.
I mean, yeah. Is that it?
Yeah.
We good with that one? All right. Judaism Inc. doesn't need the numbers. Chuck says they do when they have misinformed, brainwashed Zionists in positions of power.
Yeah, okay.
This would be like Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, these type of guys.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
That'll be part of the next one, I think, right?
Dan Crenshaw.
Laura Loomer.
Randy Fine. Who's the guy that served in the IDF? He's in Congress. Mike.
You see, but let me go back and address that real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for
And
it.
this, all right.
I'm
So,
chilling.
but see, I think this is fundamentally the problem. You know, I think if you would ask Ted Cruz or these guys, I think to a large degree, they're probably have more of a position like I have from the standpoint of
Let me quote Ted Cruz for you real quick.
Okay.
The entire reason for me going into Congress was to lobby for Israel. Quote.
All right. I want to see that, and I want to see the whole context.
John, you want to check me?
Hey, can I throw another one out there for you to check too?
Not right now, I don't.
Can I throw another one out there?
Go for it.
From Ben Shapiro. My single guarantor of my support for the United States is the support we send to Israel. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Ben Shapiro said it too.
He's an Orthodox Jew, you know. He's an Orthodox Jew, so an Orthodox Jew today.
So not a Christian conservative.
Correct. Not a conservative. In his own words, Ben Shapiro is, quote, a conservative in that he conserves classical liberal values. What a retard. Judeo-Christianity times T.
I don't consider him a conservative either. All right. When I get the time, I'm registered as an independent. And I'm going to step outside of the conservative movement at the moment. You know. So,
well, those are two separate categories.
When are you going to Israel, Chuck?
What's that?
When are you going to Israel?
Nah, dude. I'm either going to North
Korea,
northern West Virginia, or Montana.
Would you equate? I mean, I guess you just did. You equated conservative with Republican.
Well, that's what it's traditionally been.
That's the understanding, isn't it?
For the longest time. However,
when we're talking about registration, I think those are two separate things.
Well, everything is breaking down today. So, you know, whatever you want to, if you want to talk about what it was in the 80s, 90s, or the early 2000s, that's far different than where we're at today. Everything is breaking down. And so all these categories pretty much by and large are out the window.
That's why the words matter.
I think they're refining, but is what it is. Is what it is. Lord of the Rings says 2 + 2 = 4. Isn't in the Bible either.
Oh man, I wasn't sure you were going to get there.
Okay.
I was doing the slow pauses like John.
I saw you hit that
when you don't know where they're going to stop, and then you keep going, and then somebody interrupts you.
That pitched me out for this, and I said, obviously, I'm doing that to you on purpose.
All right, John, you read it then.
SUPERCHAAT. Oh, I threw an extra A in. God damn it!
Nice, dude.
Can we agree? Says Pope John Edgar IV. Can we agree? I see what you're doing. That a group with the ability to quote unquote grab the wheel of a country is a group to whom the country is beholden. I don't know that I would agree with that. It depends on how many other groups can grab the wheel. If they're the only group that can grab the wheel, then yes, probably by that logic.
I
No one-
surely expect
I mean, I
bomb
would
Israel here soon.
I mean, I would argue the big oil could grab the wheel at times. I would argue that big pharma could grab the wheel at times. I guess it's just
By next year with Tucker Carlson, Qatar will bomb Israel. We'll support them.
do what?
I'm
You
just
guys-
making fun of the idea
You
that any
know,
other
I
group
know
can
this,
swing.
incredible moment. Nobody wants to let it go except me. My old ass wants to go sleep.
Yeah, we're about to close this out. That is all for the super chats. John, if you want to close us out, give a little thank you to everybody.
I'll do my best, I guess. I still think I might be the only one. I think this went fantastic. I think, again, there's a long way to go. And so, like, look how many, everything Atlas said in his opening statement is like a week's worth of study, each little part of it. And same with Chuck, and Chuck talking about his life and the things he saw and grew up with, and then also has studied immensely as well. I think by design, this conversation has been polluted to prevent me, Chuck, Atlas, Zeb, from having it with each other. There's been little word bombs put in there that cause us to lose our shit. And I don't know, like I like to think and hope one day, I probably won't make it to Chuck Sades. Honestly, I'm not a very healthy person, but if given the chance, I would gladly sit on the internet and get shit on by a bunch of younger people, probably act exactly the same way, not probably act a lot worse, honestly. I hope you guys will give each other a chance to understand that you're going through these stages at different points in time, and everybody is saying what they mean. They say what they mean and believe. But I do think we owe it to ourselves to go do some research. And I look forward to it. Thank you, Atlas. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Zeb.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck.
Alrighty. Where's the stupid button at? Yeah. While you're here, go ahead, like the stream if you haven't already, and become a member. Thank you much, chat. We will see you on tomorrow. Corporate Report, 8 o'clock.
Shit.
NAV DMC, where debates become blood sports with a new American vision.